When Shaquille O'Neal walked into the Shaq Athletics store on Orange Avenue in Orlando, Florida, on a Tuesday afternoon in September of 2022, he was wearing a gray cap pulled low, a pair of generic tortoiseshell glasses with no prescription, and a blue staff polo that had been left for him that morning by the regional manager in a bag outside the back entrance. The name tag clipped to the pocket said O'Neal in block letters. Nobody had recognized him yet. This was, in his experience of 2 years of doing this, typical. People see what they are prepared to see, and a staff polo and a name tag tell the room what it needs to know before anyone looks at the face. The store was his. He owned it, not in the way that famous people own things by lending their name to a licensing arrangement. He owned it in the way that requires reading balance sheets on Sunday mornings and making calls on Tuesday afternoons when the quarterly numbers don't say what they should be saying. He had opened the first Shaq Athletics in 2018. There were 11 now, in 7 cities. He visited 3 or 4 a year like this. No announcement. A regional manager who knew and said nothing. A name tag that was accurate in the least useful way. He had been on the floor for 22 minutes. In those 22 minutes, he had observed a mother with a son in a motorized wheelchair who had been standing near the adaptive footwear section for 6 minutes without anyone approaching her. A teenage boy in the far corner near the performance trainers who had picked up the same shoe 3 times, checked the price tag, and put it back. And a newer employee near the register who had twice looked toward the mother and twice looked away when the assistant manager caught his eye and gave a small, economical shake of his head. On a shelf in the adaptive section, spine out, sitting among the wrong product entirely, was a pair of white Velcro closure sneakers, size 9. The shelf tag was for a running shoe 2 models older. The Velcro pair was dusty at the toe in the specific way things get dusty when they have not been touched in several weeks. Shaq looked at them for a moment. He did not move them. He kept walking. In the far corner, he passed close enough to the teenage boy to see the left shoe. The sole was separating at the toe, not fully. Just the first quarter-inch of the seam, the kind of split that starts small and announces itself by requiring the wearer to press it closed with their thumb periodically. The boy did it while Shaq watched. Absently, the way you do something you have done enough times that you don't notice anymore. Shaq kept walking. He rounded back toward the register. The assistant manager's name tag said Derek. He was 31. Efficient-looking. The kind of person who had learned to move through a store as if he owned it, which communicated one thing when you did own it, and a different thing when you didn't. He said something low to the newer employee, Jonah, 20, the one who had looked twice at the mother and twice looked away, and Jonah nodded and went to the register. Shaq went to the break room to check the inventory log. On the break room mirror, at eye level, was a sticky note. Small, yellow, the handwriting was careful, the letters slightly too deliberate to be casual. The customer is always a person first. He stood there and read it. He read it the way you read something when it arrived exactly where you needed it to arrive. He did not know whose handwriting it was yet. He had been carrying something for longer than the 2 years of these visits. Something his stepfather had said in a Fort Stewart kitchen in 1988 to a 16-year-old boy who had complained about a coach who ignored the players who weren't going to start. Philip Harrison had looked at him from across the table and said one sentence and then gone back to his newspaper. Shaq had not written it down. He had not needed to. Some things write themselves in. Now here is the part nobody else on that floor understood yet. The teenage boy in the corner, the one who had picked up the same shoe 3 times and put it back, who was pressing the separated sole closed with his thumb without knowing he was doing it, had been in this store 4 times over 3 weeks. Each time he had come in and looked at the same shoe and put it back. He had $47 in a savings account he had opened himself from mowing lawns over the summer, and the shoe cost $62. He was $15 short, and he knew it, and he came back anyway, the way people return to things they are not ready to give up on. His name was Isaiah. And the woman with the motorized wheelchair and the son who needed adaptive footwear, who had been standing untended in the adaptive section for 6 minutes, was Isaiah's aunt. They had come in together. They had split up inside the store because the aunt, whose name was Renata, had told Isaiah to go look at what he wanted while she handled the errand she'd come for. They were 17 feet apart. Neither of them had been helped. Neither of them knew the other's experience of this store was identical in the way that mattered most. They had both made themselves visible, and neither of them had been seen. Stay with us for the whole video. Because the employee who had looked twice and looked away, the one whose handwriting was on the break room mirror, is the reason this story ends the way it ends. And what Shaquille O'Neal said to him in a break room on a Tuesday afternoon is the reason Jonah Reeves still has that sticky note. Shaquille O'Neal grew up in rooms that did not always have a use for him. Army family, new schools, new gyms, new cities, where his size arrived before his reputation did, and the room had to decide what to do with him before it knew anything about him. He had gotten very good at reading rooms, at understanding in the first 2 minutes what a space thought it was for, and where the gap was between that assumption and what was actually true. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, had given him the vocabulary for it. "A room tells you what it expects," she said once. "Your job is to decide whether you're going to meet those expectations or expand them." He had carried that like a set of tools for 30 years. His stepfather, Philip Harrison, made it specific. Fort Stewart, 1988, Shaq had been complaining about a recreation center coach who spent all his time on the players who were already good and sent the others to run laps. Philip set down his newspaper. He said, "Every person who walks through that door brought themselves here. That's the first thing they gave you. Don't waste it." He picked up the newspaper. He did not say it again. He had started the Undercover store visits in 2020 after a 3-page complaint letter reached his foundation office from a woman in Memphis who had been in one of his stores with her granddaughter and been made to feel, without a single directly unkind word, like they were in the wrong place. It was the most useful document he had received all year. He responded to it personally. He showed up at the Memphis store 2 weeks later in a polo and a name tag. He did it because the gap between what a company said it was and what it was in the room where customers stood was the most important measurement in the business. Not revenue per square foot, not conversion rate. The gap. The gap in Orlando on this Tuesday had a shape. Derek Cole had not started his retail career indifferent to people. He had started it at 19 with the genuine enthusiasm of someone who loved sneakers and loved knowing more about what was on the wall than anyone else in the room. He had been excellent at it. He moved up again, and at 28 became an assistant manager, and something happened in that transition that happens to some people in some roles. The job became the management of the job rather than the thing the job was for. He had 14 metrics: conversion rate, average transaction value, units per transaction, return rate, shrinkage, scheduling efficiency, customer satisfaction, vendor compliance, floor set, inventory accuracy, 2 checklist items, training hours logged, and one more whose official name he could never remember, but whose quarterly number he had spent 2 years trying to improve. His last performance review said operationally strong 3 times. It said nothing about the woman in the adaptive section. He had noticed the Velcro sneakers on the wrong shelf that morning and made a note to move them, and then a scheduling issue absorbed the note. When Renata came in with her son, he was finishing a vendor call, and when the call ended, he gave Jonah the look. Not a look that said, "Don't help her." A look that said, "I'll explain it later," which in practice means the same thing. He had told Jonah a week before that the adaptive line wasn't worth the floor time because inventory was thin and the customers usually had medical requirements the store couldn't advise on. Practical, not cruel. He had not considered that collapsing two different sentences into one headshake produced the same effect as a third sentence he would never have said aloud. When Renata came to the desk directly, he said it cleanly and politely. "We don't really carry that line here." He believed he was being helpful. He watched her face receive it and moved on before the receiving was finished. Her face rearranged itself in 2 seconds. He was looking at his tablet by then. The gap between what a company says it is and what it is in the room is almost never malicious. That is the hard part. Malice you can find and remove. The gap is a set of incentives and pressures and small practical decisions that each make sense in isolation and together make a woman rearrange her face and walk back toward the door. Jonah Reeves had been working at Shaq Athletics for 4 months. He was 20 years old, in college, working nights and weekends because the schedule fit. And he had walked into the store on his first day with no particular feelings about sneakers, and discovered to his surprise that he had feelings about customers. Not the training module kind, not the scripted greeting and the open-ended question, the actual kind. He noticed people. He noticed the boy with the separating sole who came back every week. He noticed that the boy always looked at the same shoe and always put it back. He had almost asked once, had taken 2 steps toward the corner, and then read Derek's expression, and stopped. 2 weeks earlier, he had gone to the break room and written a sentence on a sticky note and put it on the mirror. The customer is always a person first. Not because he thought anyone would read it, because writing it was how he stayed honest with himself about what he was choosing not to do. He had been looking at it and away from it ever since. On the Tuesday in September, when Renata came in and Derek gave him the look, Jonah had stood at the register and felt the specific weight of someone who knows the right thing and is choosing the practical thing and cannot pretend not to know the difference. He had not said anything. That was the thing he would have to sit with. And then a large man in a gray cap and a staff polo appeared at the register and said, quietly, "I'm going to need you to follow me for a minute. Can you do that?" Jonah said yes. He followed the man to the break room. He looked at the mirror when they walked in, and then he looked at the man, and then he looked back at the mirror. The man was reading the sticky note. He read it the way you read something when you are in no hurry to be done with it. Then he turned around. He did not say anything about the note immediately. He said, "The woman in the adaptive section. The boy in the corner with the separating sole. You saw them. It was not a question." "Yes," Jonah said, "but you didn't go." Jonah looked at the floor for a moment. Then he looked back up. "No." The man nodded slowly. He was quiet for a moment in the way that rooms get quiet when something is being decided. "Here's what I need you to know," he said. "The woman in the adaptive section, we have 3 pairs in the stockroom. Size 7, size 9, and size 11. The 9 is on the floor, but it's on the wrong shelf. I walked past it 20 minutes ago." He paused. "And the boy in the corner has been coming in for 3 weeks. He's $15 short. I'm going to tell you something about him in a minute. But first I need to ask you something." He reached into his wallet and took out a card. Small, worn, the kind of card that has been in a wallet long enough that the corners have gone soft. He held it out. Jonah took it. The handwriting on it was not Shaq's. It was older, more angular, the handwriting of a different era. A man who had learned to write when letters were expected to stand at attention. It said, "Every person who walks through that door brought themselves here. That's the first thing they gave you. Don't waste it." Jonah read it twice. "Whose is this?" he said. "My stepfather's," the man said. "He said it once. I wrote it down." He took the card back gently. He put it back in his wallet. "You wrote something on that mirror 2 weeks ago. I want to know why you stopped believing it for 20 minutes this afternoon. You are going to have to wait just a little longer. Because before you hear what Jonah said, and before you understand what Shaquille O'Neal did next on that floor, you need to know the full shape of what was sitting in that store on a Tuesday afternoon." Isaiah had $47. The shoe was $62. He had been in 4 times. He had not told his Aunt Renata what he was saving for, because he was 15, and 15 is the age at which you begin to want things entirely on your own terms, without anyone's help making the wanting smaller. Renata had not told Isaiah that she had been turned away from the adaptive section because she had rearranged her face, and she was not going to undo the rearranging in front of her nephew. They were 17 feet apart, and they were each carrying the same thing in the same store, and neither of them knew it. The ceiling fan above the register made a sound. The store smelled like new rubber and recycled air. Nobody moved. Jonah looked at the man in the break room. He looked at the sticky note. He said, "Because Derek told me not to. And I let that be enough." The man looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded once, not in judgment, in recognition. The kind of nod that says, "I have been in that exact sentence." "All right," he said. "Here's what's going to happen." He told Jonah about the adaptive shoes in the stockroom. He told him to get all 3 pairs and bring them to the adaptive section and set them up correctly and go introduce himself to the woman and her son and find out what they needed. He said, "Take as long as it takes. Don't look at Derek. Don't look at the clock. Just be in that conversation until it's done." Jonah went. Then the man in the cap and glasses walked to the far corner of the store, where a 15-year-old boy was standing in front of a display of performance trainers, holding a size 10 box, reading the price tag for what Shaq knew was the 5th time across 4 visits. He stopped beside him. He looked at the shoe. "Good choice," he said. "That outsole is better than anything else on this wall." Isaiah looked up at the staff polo and the name tag. "I know," he said carefully. "I'm still deciding. On whether to get it? A beat. On whether I can." The man looked at the left shoe, at the 1/4-inch split in the sole. "How many times have you been in?" he said. Isaiah's face shifted. Not wariness, more like someone who has just realized they have been more visible than they thought. 4. 4. The man repeated in the way that makes a number mean something. He set the box back on the bench. He said, "Can I show you something?" He walked Isaiah across the store, to the adaptive section. Jonah was there, kneeling beside the motorized wheelchair, talking to Renata's son, who was 11 years old and whose name was Caleb, and who was currently engaged in the specific concentrated joy of a child who has just had 3 shoe options placed in front of him and been told he could try all of them. Renata was standing with one hand on the back of the wheelchair, watching Jonah, and her face had a different quality than the one she had worn at the front desk 6 minutes ago. The rearrangement had come undone. She was just her face. Isaiah stopped when he saw his aunt. Renata looked up when she saw her nephew. A moment passed between them, the kind of moment that happens when 2 people who have been separately carrying the same thing in the same room find out they were not alone in it. You came in here too? Isaiah said. For Caleb, she said. She looked at the boy beside him, at the staff polo, and then back at Isaiah. They had what we needed. Isaiah looked at the shoes being lined up for Caleb. He looked at Jonah. Then he looked at the man beside him. You brought him over here, he said. It was not a question either. I introduced you, the man said. You were already here. Caleb chose the size 9, white with Velcro closures, which happened to be the pair that had been sitting spine out on the wrong shelf for several weeks until 20 minutes ago. He held them in both hands and looked at them with the focused authority of someone who has made a considered decision. Renata looked at the price and then looked at the man and said, You're going to tell me these are discounted, aren't you? Employee pricing, the man said. Standard policy for anyone whose family is helped by an employee during their visit. He said it the way you say something you have just decided is a policy. Jonah helped you. Jonah gets the discount. Renata looked at Jonah. Jonah looked at the man in the cap and glasses with an expression that had no name for it yet. The man turned to Isaiah. The $62 shoe, he said. You've been saving. Isaiah straightened slightly. I'm 15 short, he said. He said it directly, without apology. I know, the man said. Here's what I want to tell you about that. He reached into his wallet again. Not for the card this time. He took out a piece of paper, folded twice, the kind of thing someone has been carrying with a purpose. He held it out to Isaiah. It was a letter. One paragraph on Shaq Athletics letterhead. It said that one Isaiah, last name left intentionally blank, had been named the store's first community recognition recipient for demonstrating the kind of patient, earnest investment in quality that the brand was built to serve, and that the enclosed gift card covered the balance on any single item in the store. Isaiah read it. He read it again. He looked up. The man had taken off the glasses. The name tag that said O'Neill had not meant anything until this exact second. Isaiah said nothing for a moment. Then he said, very quietly, The whole store is yours. 49% of it, the man said. It was not true. The other 51 is the people in it. He put the glasses back on. Go get your shoes. Now here is what the floor had not yet understood. Derek Cole had been watching from the register since Jonah disappeared into the stockroom. The adaptive shoes coming out. Jonah kneeling beside the wheelchair. The corporate visitor walking a teenage boy across the store. Adding it up with the dread of someone who is good at metrics and cannot find the metric that tells him whether he is watching a problem or a solution. The man in the cap came to the register last. He looked at Derek. Stockroom, he said. 2 minutes. In the stockroom, the cap came off. He did not raise his voice. He told Derek what he had seen, the Velcro shoes on the wrong shelf, Isaiah's 4 visits, and the $47. Renata's face rearranging itself at the front desk in 2 seconds, and what that rearranging cost. He said none of it was monstrous, and all of it was wrong, and the distance between those two things was exactly the distance that needed closing. You have 14 metrics, he said. I built the 14 metrics. I am telling you now that the 15-year-old in the corner is the metric. The woman in the adaptive section is the metric. Jonah's sticky note is the metric. Everything else is how you get there. Derek was quiet. Then that sticky note has been on the mirror for 2 weeks. I know, the man said. I walked past it every day. He said it the way people say the thing they have just understood the full weight of. So did I, the man said. Today, he held out his hand. Derek looked at it, the size of it, unmistakable now that the glasses were off, and shook it. The way you shake a hand when you understand it is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of one. A boy named Isaiah took his shoes to the register and paid $62. That became $47 because Jonah rang it up under employee, pricing with the specific creative authority of someone who has just been told that a policy exists and has decided to extend it, and a man in a cap and glasses did not correct him. Isaiah wore the shoes out of the store and pressed the old left sole one final time with his thumb out of habit on the way through the door, and then stopped and looked at his foot and did not do it again. An 11-year-old named Caleb wore his adaptive sneakers out of the store in the same bag, holding the bag in both hands, and told his mother they were the best shoes he had ever had, which was also the first shoes he had ever had that were his specifically rather than modified from a regular pair, and Renata held the door and did not say anything because there was nothing to say that the bag was not already saying. Jonah Reeves took the sticky note off the break room mirror the following week. He did not throw it away. He put it in his wallet, in the slot where the note card had been, where it fit exactly, as if the slot had been made for it. Derek Cole asked for a one-on-one with his regional manager the following Tuesday and requested a full review of the adaptive footwear program across all 11 stores. The review happened. 3 locations had inventory in stockrooms that had not been on the floor in months. Displays went up in all 11. A training module was updated. None of the communications mentioned what had happened on a Tuesday afternoon in Orlando. The results spoke in a different language. And Shaquille O'Neal drove home on Orange Avenue with the cap on the passenger seat and the note card in his wallet, and thought about his stepfather in a Fort Stewart kitchen in 1988, setting down a newspaper and saying one sentence that had just taken 34 years to finish, arriving in the right room. Every person who walks through that door brought themselves here. That's the first thing they gave you. Don't waste it. He had built 11 stores on that sentence without knowing that was what he was doing. He knew it now. He thought, driving home in the September evening with the windows down, that some sentences are not statements. They are buildings. You live in them for decades before you understand the architecture. That is the whole thing. That is all it ever is. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from tonight. People who have worked retail find this channel. People who have been the customer in the corner find it. People who have written something on a mirror and then looked away from it find it. We want to know where you are. If this one found you somewhere real, the like button is right there, and everyone tells us to keep going. Subscribe and join a community that believes the person who brings themselves through the door deserves to be seen. The next video is already there. We will see you there.